What's up, YouTube? It's Dakota, and today we're going to be doing a throwback for the modern format. And with all this talk of four color elementals, four color money pile, whatever your preferred name for that abomination of a deck that you may have, it got me thinking about some of the other kind of like oppressive decks in the modern format and ones that kind of required change later on or things like that. And that really had like a stranglehold on the metagame and just seemed to have like, its foot on the throat. And this deck in particular, the one I'm going to talk about today in this throwback, is one that kind of made a lot of people quit Magic. And a lot of times I would see people just kind of picking up the deck for the first time, really not playing any matches with it, and just steamrolling competition and qualifying for pro tours or invitationals and things like that. Just never having played the deck. So today I'm super excited, and I hope you guys are too, to go back to 2019 and the infamous Hogaak Summer one. So this article was written by Martin Yuza back in August 1st of 2019. Again, it's right around 3 years ago, a few months short of like 3 years ago. But the article is aptly titled "Welcome to Hogaak Summer." I believe that this article was written just before the uh, Mythic Championship or whatever they called, essentially like the one of the Pro Tour events that year, which I believe was just modern, and a lot of it was Hogaak decks. They're just playing Hogaak that were trying to be good against just a general metagame that was expected, and then there was some decks that were just playing four copies of Leyline of the Void in their deck specifically to host the Hogaak decks, um, giving themselves a better chance, like in the mirror match, if they were expecting, most of the field to be Hogaak, and I believe a lot of the field was Hogaak. And crazy to think in a video where I am going to be talking about this deck and like how crazy it was, and how crazy it actually ended up being post ban, which I believe might be. I'm probably getting my timeline mixed up, but this deck was just insane, and for a while it just kind of like haunted the modern metagame pre-ban and post-ban. So as you can see here, the list of decks that like Martin lists in here is that Phoenix was for the longest time, like before Modern Horizons, was probably easily one of the best decks in the format, and really could just kind of kill you out of nowhere, playing like two, three, four Phoenixes on like turn two or like turn three was just insane. And remember, if I remember correctly, Faithless Looting, and I believe we'll see in the list, Faithless Looting was still legal at this time too. So I mean, a lot of these decks were playing Faithless Looting. I know even like Grixis Shadow was playing like Faithless Looting, because even though the card disadvantage kind of sucked, where you were kind of at parity, or you were at a disadvantage casting it, and then for like 3 mana you were kind of at parity. It was still really good, just the fact that it filtered your draws and helped you dig 2 cards closer for 1 mana. And then a lot of the other decks, like the Hollow Divine decks, or even just like the Hollow One variants, the Is It Phoenix and things like that, just got to play those cards and abuse the discard outlet that they created. So we have Is It Phoenix, obviously having the Faithless Looting, blue white control. Um, Always just seems to kind of like pop up around like metas that like you can kind of narrow down what exactly players are going to be playing. Eldrazi Tron, I mean, getting to play Thought Nuts here, Reality Smasher, super early turns, even like the Hogaak deck would have to have a reasonably fast start to really be able to beat any of that, and Eldrazi Tron kind of fit the bill of like disruption through Thought Nuts here, and it being a clock as well, and then Reality Smasher just being the absolute best clock that the deck can afford to bring out. And then even though it's banned now, like Simian Spirit Guide, just to really ramp out some of your other spells where you could play even like a Matter Reshaper on like turn three with the right set of draws. I believe Eye of Ugin is banned at this point, so they only had Eldrazi Temple to make it 2 mana essentially on the first turn of the game without having to assemble Tron. The Devoted Druid Vizier combo, it says Karn combo. I'm assuming that Karn combo just refers to the like Michelson's Lattice combo, where like you could play Lattice off of, or you could go get Lattice with Karn, and then the turn that you play Lattice, your opponent's essentially locked out of the game. They can only attack, and normally you have something in place to where attacking really doesn't do anything, or they're not even able to kill the Karn, so you essentially lock them out of the game, and they have to sit there and wait till you win. Whereas the Devoted Druid Vizier of Remedies combo is just makes infinite green mana and then just gets to play a really big thing or just a really big ballista. And of course, Hogaak, the last one. There's the Bridge from Below. So this is Bridge from Below. This is post banning. Okay. Maybe if I would have read a little bit more, I would have been more prepared. But Hogaak, post Bridge from Below, where everyone thought Bridge was the problem, that this deck was going to slow down. And just to go really quickly, what the deck used to do, if you had two Bridge from Belows, and a Hogaak, you could, and an Alter Dementia, you could sack Hogaak to Alter Dementia to mill 8 cards, and then Bridge from Below would make 2 zombies, and you get to cast the Hogaak again. And eventually you would mill over more Bridge from Belows, which means that you would get to exile less cards to cast Hogaak, which then also meant that you were able to cast Hogaak more times, make more zombies. Eventually you made enough zombies to where you could just start sacking them and targeting your opponent to mill them, and essentially comboing in that way where you didn't have to beat like the ensnaring bridges and things like that. You just had to be able to beat traditional graveyard hate like some of the other decks, and it wasn't nothing for the deck. Like even if it couldn't beat like a Leyline of the Void or something like that, it was very reasonable to cast a Hogaak with the creatures that it got to play and the amount of cards that it got to see. That you could just essentially hard cast Hogaak or just play around, and then having an 8/8 Trampler, because Trample is the hidden text on this card. uh, yeah, like you could just easily win games that way too, just being a really, really anemic beatdown deck. Some other decks that are noted in the article, Jund, even though like Jund and like Tron kind of always show up, and then like at this time, Humans was kind of like a deck that I think if you knew a lot of like the tricks and stuff like that, you could have definitely made it work in the format. In fact, you could definitely like learn the tricks and stuff, and depending on the deck that you were playing against, and the kind of draw you had, you could still just kill your opponent with Infect. But as stated here, both heavily depend on winning the die roll, being on the draw in Modern, and your only turn one play being a Noble Hierarch or Aether Vial. If you're the Humans deck, in fact, just being like a Glistener Elf, and then just kind of getting blocked forever by someone like the cheap dorks that want to die anyway from said top deck in format slash deck that plays Lightning Bolt and things like that. Um, so none of the meat and potatoes, and basically why we're here today. All right, Modern Hogaak. This deck is the non Bridge from the Below version, because you see here there's like one Alter Dementia, which I still like the card. This is the card I was talking about where you can sacrifice a creature and mill a player equal to the power of that creature. You have cards like Lightning Axe as discard outlets to discard things like Vengevine and Bloodghast. Also, just dealing 5 damage to any target. Not very good against like Hogaak because it's like an 8/8, things like that. But some of like the other creatures in the format, like dealing 5 damage and being a discard outlet, was very, very good for the deck. Obviously, being 1 mana, like we see cards like Unholy Heat, which just completely, you know, throw Lightning Axe to the wayside. And the only reason why, like nowadays, that you'd play Lightning Axe is because you want the discard outlet. Um, and not necessarily just like the amount of damage it can do for 1 mana. Of course, four full faithless, four full 4/4. Gosh, there's so many F's in this card. Faithless Looting, F4 copies in the main deck. Draw 2, discard 2. This for the longest time was probably one of the best cards played in Modern, and for good reason, because a lot of the best decks in the format just played 4 copies of it. Got to abuse drawing the cards, got to abuse discarding the cards, and flashing it back was also just great a lot of the time to dig towards a spell that you need to hopefully push through the last extra points of damage, find the last pieces of your combo, etc., etc. Need I say more? Um, Now, the creatures obviously is kind of what makes this deck unique in the past variants, like before Bridge from Below got banned, and kind of what the deck morphed into. So when Bridge from Below got banned, everyone just kind of assumed that this deck kind of fell off. When in reality, it probably got better in a weird way. So like you have to play cards like Carrion Feeder, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You had to like essentially combo with Gravecrawler because Gravecrawler lets you cast from the graveyard as long as you control a zombie. Carrion Feeder, curiously enough, is a zombie. So you could have games where even if you didn't have anything, if you just had Carrion Feeder and a Gravecrawler, and then you had something like Carrion Feeder itself, or even like Ultra Dementia, you could just like mill your opponent for cards, cast Gravecrawler, mill your opponent, and just keep milling your opponent, or even mill yourself to get like Vengevines and stuff, which a lot of the times you were doing because you were actually casting the Gravecrawler, so like you bring back Vengevines that you may have milled. Citrus Supplier was a relatively new card at the time. When it enters the battlefield or dies, you mill 3 cards, which again, very good for this deck when you have cards like Hogaak that you want to be milling, and Vengevine, and even Bloodghast and things like that. Satyr Wayfinder and Hedron Crab. Hedron Crab seemed like more like the slam dunk include. Satyr Wayfinder was the weird one, and I believe it even explains it later in the article, which I will have the article linked. So if anyone wants to check it out, they are more than welcome to read further along. Hedron Crab, whenever you play land, a target player mills 3 cards. And then Satyr Wayfinder lets you reveal the top 4. You can put a land in your hand, put the rest in your graveyard. So functionally, cards like Hedron Crab, you could not play it on turn 1, but then like on turn 2, you could just play a crab, play a fetch land, mill 6 cards, and then cast another 1-drop, and then you'd actually be able to bring back Vengevines. Or if you play like a crab on turn 1, you have the chance of milling more cards, like casting a Stitcher Supplier first to mill 3, and then of course playing a fetch land to mill another 3 cards, so getting essentially 9 looks at milling at least 1 or 2 Vengevines, or even a look at like milling a Bloodghast or 2 to be able to bring back and maybe even cast like Hogaak after milling that many cards. And if you play like the Legacy version, which is like a sidebar to this, I played the Legacy version probably about a year ago. No, maybe not even a year ago. Maybe like 6 to 8 months ago, or whatever, for like a Legacy event. And there was a lot of games where like you just cast like a Hogaak on turn 2 and have like 12 to 14 power and play on turn 2. And this deck is like no exception. Like the only difference is that like the Legacy version gets to play like the Bridge from Below version of it. But even then, like this back in the day, the fact that you could have 2 Vengevines and a Hogaak in play, and that's just 16 power, and your opponent really didn't have too many efficient answers like dealing with it in game 1. So like this deck just kind of got to run over a lot of people if this deck got to play a game of Magic. Uh, we talked about before Leyline of Void. There was a time where it was a serious discussion on if you expect to play Hogaak in the majority of your matches, that you should just be playing for Leyline of the Void main deck, and the fact that you had like Faithless Looting, getting to ditch other copies of Leyline of the Void is really, really good. Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Collective Brutality, Nature's Claim, Assassin's Trophy, and Force of Vigor kind of round out the last 11 slots of the sideboard. I mean, a lot of these just like matchup dependent. Of course, you kind of see like have seen up here, like Is It Phoenix, Blue White Control, Eldrazi Tron, the Devoted Druid Vizier combo, and of course other like Hogaak decks and things like that is kind of like what to expect. I believe with like Force of Vigor, Assassin's Trophy, and even Nature's Claim, just being able to pull double duty on beating Tron, because Tron is also a deck that could in theory has like draws that could beat Hogaak. You know, one of Hogaak's like faster draws, maybe not the nut draw, but some of its other faster draws if Tron is on the play. So definitely having these cards helps in that regard as well. Of course, Martin goes on right. This deck is broken. Without disruption, you put 14 to 20 power into play with a combination of Hogaak and Vengevines. And almost half of your games in the deck also mulligans very well. This was the time that we had London Mulligan, so you essentially got to draw 7. If you didn't like it, put it back, draw another 7, put 1 back, whatever. You know, and the deck was like super resilient because you had 4 and 5 card hands where you could still put double digits amount of power into play. And yeah, that's kind of like my I guess my throwback Thursday, if you will, because this should be going up on Thursday. So my throwback to probably one of the best modern decks of all time. Definitely not in the full powered version like I thought, but Oh well, sometimes you get got by yourself, and that's okay. Um, this easily is probably a step below the full powered like Hogaak deck. But the fact that a lot of decks that you see that kind of get like a major component hit, I mean, like Bridge from Below getting banned meant that the deck did not have like an infinite combo. It meant that you had to win through combat damage essentially, or that your opponent just didn't really want to play the matchup and they just conceded the match, which I'm sure it happened at least once to somebody out there playing the deck. But anyway, like we very rarely see decks that perform very well when like a key piece of their deck gets banned, and we kind of saw the Hogaak deck was super resilient, and essentially the only way the Hogaak deck finally got to go away is when our boy Hogaak finally got the axe, and so did Faithless Looting, so we just didn't go to people just running around like playing Phoenix and things like that. Like everybody kind of had to adapt to a different metagame. We saw Phoenix kind of take a back seat after that banning. Obviously, Vengevine type decks kind of went back to the wayside. People just kind of went back to playing like humans and things like that, while we tried to figure out what the metagame would eventually evolve to. Um, and yeah, that's kind of the history of like the Hogaak deck. Things to kind of remember what you would have seen and things like that for that metagame. So yeah, super interesting. Super sweet to kind of look back on decks like this, just to see what essentially happens like after bannings, and especially when like major tournaments like Mythic Championships come up, and there's obviously a lot of money on the line, a lot of pride, invites to worlds and things like that. So getting to see kind of like what the best of the best kind of come up with in terms of either reinventing or trying to figure out like what the exactly the best deck in the format is always been interesting, and definitely a way that can help you with deck building if you prefer to try to innovate or try to make changes to the current decks that you decide to play. And that's going to do it for this week's Modern Throwback. If you have any memories or things that you would like to share from Hogaak Summer, maybe things that you heard from some of your other friends or people that you know for your LGS that may have played during that time, or even some of your own personal experience playing with or against the deck, please be sure to leave in the comments. I would love to hear some stories from honestly that point in like Magic's history. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of my stuff, be sure to check out the latest video that I have floating somewhere around in here. And of course, if you want to see any more of my content, please consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell so you know when I have new videos uploading. That's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.